Committee will come to order. Before we begin, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that when he arrives, our colleague from Tennessee, Congressman Steve Cohen, be allowed to sit at the dais and participate in today's proceedings. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's full committee hearing, a continued assessment of delays in VA medical care and preventable veteran deaths. Today's hearing is the fulfillment of a promise I made in early January to follow up on delays in care at Veterans Affairs Medical Centers in Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. That together resulted in 9 preventable veteran deaths. I had hoped that during this hearing we could be discussing the concrete changes that VA had made, changes that would show beyond a doubt that VA had placed the care of our veterans first, and that VA's commitment to holding any employee who did not completely embody a commitment to excellence through actions appropriate to the employee's failure to be held accountable. Instead, today, we are faced with even more questions and an ever-mounting list of evidence that despite the myriad of patient safety incidents that have occurred at VA medical facilities in recent memory, the status quo is firmly entrenched at the Department of Veterans Affairs. On Monday, shortly before this public hearing, VA provided evidence that a total of 23 veterans have died due to delays in care at VA medical centers. Even with this latest disclosure as to where the deaths occurred, our committee still doesn't know when they may have happened, beyond the statement from VA that they most likely occurred between 2010 and 2012. These particular deaths resulted primarily from delays in gastrointestinal care. Information on other preventable deaths due to consult delays remains unavailable. Outside of the VA's consult review, this committee has reviewed at least 18 preventable deaths that occurred because of mismanagement, improper infection control practices, and a whole host of maladies that plague the VA healthcare system all across this great nation. Yet the department's stonewall has only grown higher and more non-responsive. There is no excuse for these incidents to have ever occurred. Congress has met every resource request that VA has made, and I guarantee that if the department would have approached this committee at any time to tell us that help was needed to ensure that veterans received the care they required, every single possible action would have been taken to ensure that VA could, in fact, adequately care for our veterans. This is the third full committee hearing that I have held on patient safety. And I'm going to save our VA witnesses a little bit of time this morning by telling you what I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear the rote repetition of, and I quote, "The department is committed to providing the highest quality care which our veterans have earned and that they deserve. When incidents occur, we identify, mitigate, and prevent additional risks. Prompt reviews prevent similar events in the future and hold those persons accountable." End quote. Another thing I don't want to hear is again, and I quote from numerous VA statements, including a recent press release, "While any adverse incident for a veteran within our care is one too many," unquote, "preventable deaths represent a small fraction of the veterans who seek care from VA every year. What our veterans have truly earned and deserve is not more platitudes and, yes, one adverse incident is one too many. Look, we all recognize that no medical system is infallible, no matter how high the quality standards may be. But I think we also recognize that the VA healthcare system is unique because it has a unique, special obligation not only to its patients, the men and women who honorably serve our nation in uniform, but also to the hardworking taxpayers of the United States of America. When errors do occur, and they seem to be occurring with alarming frequency, what VA owes our veterans and our taxpayers in that order is a timely, transparent, accurate, and honest account about what mistakes happened, how those mistakes are being fixed, and what concrete actions are being taken to ensure accountability. It seems to me that my staff has been asking for further details on the deaths that occurred as a result of the delays in care at VA medical facility now for months. And only 2 days before this hearing did VA provide any information that we have been asking for. Even then, that information is far from complete in what VA's effort is to prevent future deaths. It concerns me even more than that at a briefing that VA provided on Monday and the testimony that's provided today, very few details about what, if any, specific actions have been taken to ensure accountability for 23 veterans who lost their lives and the many more who were harmed because they did not get the care they needed in a timely fashion. The VA witness's testimony that is provided for today is ridiculous. It answers no question. It provides no new information. And I'm tired of begging the Department of Veterans Affairs to answer this committee's questions. On our first panel today, we're going to hear from a veteran who sought care through the William Jennings Bryan Dorn VA Medical Center in Columbia, South Carolina, a facility that I visited earlier this year. That veteran, Mr. Barry Coates, is going to tell us that, and I quote, "The gross negligence and crippling backlog epidemic of the VA system has not only handed me a death sentence, but ruined my quality of life." Mr. Coates waited for almost a year and would have waited even longer had he not personally, persistently insisted on receiving the colonoscopy that he and his doctors knew that they needed. That same colonoscopy revealed that Mr. Coates had stage 4 colon cancer that had metastasized to his lungs and to his liver. Maybe that's why VA does not want to define accountability in terms of employees who have been fired. The department's going to testify this morning that instead we should focus our accountability efforts on correcting system deficiencies in order to prevent adverse events from occurring again. There's nothing wrong with fixing the system, but Mr. Coates deserves better than that. His adverse event already has happened, and for him there is no going back. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Ms. Brown, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing today. We can all agree that veterans' safety and quality of care issues at the VA health facilities are the utmost concern for this committee. However, it is unfortunate that we must continually call these hearings to make sure that our nation's veterans are receiving the care for which they've already paid dearly for on the battlefield and in service to protecting the freedom we all hold most dear. I also find it disturbing that just 2 days before this hearing, the VA has released findings that its healthcare personnel are not fully trained in the importance of timely consulting when treating a veteran. The definition defined a consultant as the act of seeking information or advice from someone with expertise in a particular area. The system the VA set up to make these consults easy obviously broke down, and it is possible that at least 5 veterans died in Florida because the right information was not shared with the right health professionals. I am concerned that in the 5 years after the colonoscopy debacle in the Miami VA, nothing has changed. To refresh your memory, in 2009, staff members at a number of VA facilities noticed improper reprocessing of scopes contrary to the manufacturing instructions. The VA properly ordered all facilities to step up and get retrained on the procedures. We want employees to feel free to report questionable issues and procedures without fear of retribution for trying to save lives. It seems that from the new consulting problems that the retraining stopped at this one procedure. The fact sheet your office put out regarding the consult talks a lot about procedures and adverse events. However, I've heard that before and again, our veterans are suffering, and I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony today and explanations for this lack of proper care and accountability for these mistakes. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Joining us today for our first panel is Mr. Barry Coates. Mr. Coates is a disabled veteran who served in the United States Army and currently resides in the Palmetto State. As I stated earlier, he is going to share his very personal story of attempting to receive needed care from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Also on the first panel is Daniel Dellinger, National Commander of the American Legion. Commander is accompanied by Edward Lilly, Senior Field Officer. Thank you all for your service, both in and out of uniform. Thank you in particular, Mr. Coates, for being here today and for agreeing to share with what I know is a very painful story. This committee is honored to have you here before us today, and you are now recognized for your statement, Mr. Coates.
First of all, I'd like to thank Chairman Mr. Miller and Ms. Brown and other members of the committee. I had an opportunity to be able to come in front of you today and give you my testimony. I would like to start, first of all, with the first part of my paragraph of my testimony, and I think each one of y'all have that. My name is Barry Lynn Coates, and due to the inadequate and lack of follow-up care I received through the VA system, I stand here before you terminally ill today. I joined the Army in February of 1991, anxious to serve my country. Near the end of basic training, and an injury to my back derailed this plan, and I was discharged around the 1st of May the same year. After 5 years of fight to obtain service connection status of my injury and treatment and pain management requirement as a result of it, I finally became eligible for medical treatment through the VA system. That was the start of the long, painful, emotional, and unnecessary journey that brings me here to you today. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to stand here and testify in front of the committee. For the veterans who have died because of this unnecessary and tragedy that occurred that shouldn't have never occurred to start with. Also for the families who have lost those veterans, and for the veterans who have suffered and are still suffering because of this, like myself and their families. I want to be a voice to them and an advocate to them. hopefully, this testimony will prove to the VA system the lack of knowledge or the lack of care that they gave to myself and to other veterans that need to be changed. Something needs to be created to change the policy of the way this is done. I've talked to numerous of veterans since all this occurred, and a lot of them, I hear the same story, like my story. You know, why didn't we receive help? Why didn't I get care earlier? Why didn't it get outsourced? And outsourced is probably a good thing that needs to be put into policy if it's backed up to a part of they can't control. Another thing also that needs to be done for the veterans struggling, for the ones who have lost their husband or wife, it's hard for them to even get care and medical. Another thing too to look at, if I'm serving in the military today, and I look at what happened to veterans outside to the VA system and their care, and I see what's going on there, like what happened to myself and other veterans, what is a member of the military service is going to think? They're going to think one thing, well, they are not taking care of the veterans outside of this. Well, one day I'll be a veteran also. Are they going to be there to take care of myself, my family? And that's a big question that probably serving servicemen are serving now, they're going to ask the question, why would I need to serve my country if they're not going to look at me and protect me after my service and become a veteran? And I think that's something we need to focus on, because military service is really volunteer. If you look at time and history dating back to the Revolutionary War, it was all voluntary. And if it hadn't been for that voluntary service, that we wouldn't have what we got today in this country. And without that, we wouldn't be here today to be able to talk to you all and deal with this matter. So if something needs to be done, someone needs to be held accountable for it. And I understand from other sources that no one's been held accountable for it. And I think someone should be held accountable for it, whether it be a director of the Dorn VA Hospital, whether it be the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, or even the President of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. And before we go to questions, I do want to ask Commander Dellinger if he would please proceed with his statement. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
As the nation's largest wartime veteran service organization, the American Legion dedicates significant resources towards working with and observing the work of the VA. Through the Legion's system, we're saving medical facility visits, town hall meetings with veterans, and the feedback we receive from the thousands of American Legion certified veteran service officers across the nation. We're able to provide you with the specific details in our written testimony that you have before you. I will highlight just a few of those details to you now. Chairman Miller and members of the committee, on behalf of the 2.5 million members of the American Legion, I want to thank you for inviting the American Legion to share our research and position on the important topics of delay in medical care and patient deaths. I'm here today because the American Legion has no greater priority than ensuring that veterans receive timely and quality health care as a result of their service-connected illnesses. It seems a day cannot pass without a news report about the problems and challenges the VA faces with delays and quality of care issues. While we wait for things to get better, hundreds of thousands of veterans are waiting for their initial disability claim or appeal, which prevents them from receiving VA health care. While we wait, transitioning service members are falling through the cracks due to DoD and VA's inability to create a single interoperable medical record. While we wait, officials in the VA central offices are preventing hospitals from being transparent during crisis. While we wait, veteran suicides continue to plague our nation at 22 per day with no clear strategy from VA on addressing suicides proactively. And while we wait, veterans are being overprescribed medications for pain, TBI, PTSD with reluctance toward looking at complementary and alternative medicine because giving out pills is faster than providing veterans the therapy sessions they need. In January, the American Legion went to Jackson, Mississippi, where a veteran died as a result of when all the blood was drained from his body because he wasn't properly monitored during a medical procedure. When we asked our task force members, asked the facility director for a copy of the action plan they were using to address their problems, the director refused to give them a copy. Last November, we visited Pittsburgh. At that time, we believed the Legionnaire outbreak that left 6 dead and more than 20 sick was due to equipment failure. The neglect on the part of the VA to notify local health officials, veterans, and patients was bad enough. But then later, we learned that CBS News report that senior officials at the Pittsburgh VA actually knew that human error was behind the outbreak and not equipment failures, as officials had suggested to this committee. Our System Worth Saving Task Force went to Atlanta in January where 2 veterans died of an overdose and 1 committed suicide, which was attributed to mismanagement and an inability to get the mental health care they needed in a timely manner. Last night, there was a daughter that missed her dad saying goodnight. Today, there's a wife who misses her husband. Tomorrow, a father will still regret that he was able to outlive his son because someone at the VA didn't do their job. Patient deaths are tragic. Preventable patient deaths are unacceptable. But failure to disclose safety information, or worse, to cover up mistakes, is unforgivable. And the American Legion will not sit quietly by while some VA employees cover up the truth, and the VA shouldn't either. We need to continue to ask the hard questions. What is VA doing to fix these problems, and are they concerned about keeping me informed? How is VA holding their leaders accountable for these errors? And finally, why is the VA reducing inpatient long-term care beds, ICU, emergency rooms, and closing hospitals such as Hot Springs, South Dakota? The American Legion will not stop asking the hard questions, and we hope you won't either. The American Legion looks forward to working with this committee as we work together with the VA to ensure that VA provides the best health care anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Mr. Coates, in the more or less year that it took for you to receive a colonoscopy through the Department of Veterans Affairs, did anybody at any time ever tell you that you could be authorized to receive the procedure that you needed done through a private provider in the community, enabling you to get a diagnosis sooner?
No, sir. Never was advised during that time period. During that time period, I've seen from January of 2011, when I first complained about it, till the day of my colonoscopy, which was December the 9th of 2011. I've seen 4 different doctors that was in the VA system. One was Rock Hill Clinic, outpatient, Dr. Verma. She was my outpatient clinic doctor I had in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I presently moved to the location I live now. I transferred. It takes roughly anywhere from 4 to 6 months to get a transfer to a different location for outpatient care, which would have been the Florence Clinic. Upon that, I'd seen Dr. Vermer on January, March, and I think in May of that same year. And each time, my problem got worse, and she made notes in her comments because I retrieved copies of those from the VA, and she made note of those that say it may need colonoscopy. Never set a consult up for it. Upon getting transferred to the Florence Clinic in June of 2011, if I remember correctly, Dr. Newman was my clinic doctor there. And being a new patient, he done a full exam, looked over information from Dr. Vermer prior to treating me, and he kind of got upset because she didn't have me on certain prescription because of taking pills for pain or cause certain problems, and that I should have been on something already from being on those for quite a few years. But he immediately set me a consult up with a GI surgeon, which I didn't never get to appointment with her until probably either around the 8th month, maybe the 9th month, if I remember correctly, Dr. Kim. And upon seeing her, I seen her twice. She delayed it another 2 to 3 months. I went back to her again around the 10th month. We didn't have a good communication ability between each other because she kind of made me mad from my first appointment because of things that she could have done then that would have resulted earlier and set the consult up for a colonoscopy earlier if she would have done a couple of other procedures other than a physical exam. I learned that she could have done a CT exam or a CT scan. She could have done a laparoscope exam, which would have found a tumor that was only 5 inches in the area, in the lower rectum area. After that appointment with her on the 10th, she set me up for a consult for the colonoscopy to be done, which I received the appointment in the mail 2 weeks later, and it was actually scheduled for April of the following year. We're talking 6 more months out, and I'd already been in pain for 8 months already and suffering because of this. But I didn't let that stand in front of me, so I called and the department that scheduled that appointment, and they told me that that's the normal time, is usually around 6 months before you can get a colonoscopy. There was nothing that she could do to get it done earlier. That only way you could get it done earlier is request your physician to write the chief GI surgeon or either the gastrologist to get it done sooner. Or you could call each day and see if anyone dropped off from the appointment schedule. And I asked her, could she write my name down and call me if someone had dropped off. She said she couldn't do that. But unfortunately, due to the Lord's grace, she called me the next morning at 9:30 and asked me could I come and to appointment on around 2:30 that day, and which I did. And then that's when I was set up for the colonoscopy done at the Fort Jackson Military Hospital on December the 9th. So from January to December the 9th was a whole year.
One other question. Do you know what an institutional disclosure is? You ever heard that term before?
No, sir.
It's where VA notifies a patient when there's been an adverse event, such as a consult delay, that ultimately resulted in the failure to diagnose an issue. So you're saying you never received an institutional notice?
Not from my knowledge, no, sir.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I think I asked the first question to the American Legion, Mr. Diligent. During your system worth saving visits outlined in your testimony, did you encounter common themes throughout the VA Medical Center? And how long have you all been doing this?
We've been doing these system worth saving for the last 10 years.
10 years?
Yes, we have.
Yes, sir.
And we've been, we go in, we do a town hall meeting the day before with the local veterans to learn their concerns, and then we go into the hospitals and we review their procedures and visit the hospital.
Have you seen, since you've been doing it for 10 years, and I've been on this committee for 22, have you seen any improvements over the last 10 years in the system?
I would say yes, we have seen improvements. There's still areas that need improving dramatically, but for the overall system, yes. I was actually in Salt Lake City a couple months ago, and the director, first thing she had in her hand was a water quality test to show that she had done it. So they've started knowing when we're coming to be prepared, and they do a better job.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Cody, let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And you're serving today, being here. And I also want you to know that no one can determine when we're going to leave here. That's in the hands of the Lord, and they have a lot of new technology and equipment, and I know someone that they release in that you're going to die right away, and 4 years later, they're still living. So we got to continue to work to make sure you get the best treatment there that's needed. When you were going through this process, did you ever talk to any top officials? You were getting the runaround with the system, it seems. But did you ever try to talk to the head of the VA at the particular hospital or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I didn't, which I probably should have been more aggressive, like I was trying to get an early appointment.
Mm-hmm.
And not to discredit what you said, you shouldn't have to do that.
No, you shouldn't.
Uh,
But we don't want you to be a victim either.
no, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
No, ma'am. And nobody wants to be a victim, and no one wants to be pointed a finger to.
Mhm.
But I should have, but I didn't. But a lot of times you learn from hard things you do and mistakes that you make, and give that advice to other vets, and which I do. I represent a lot of other veterans around my community and my state that I help with VA compensation claims, and also tort claims. I help with them also, and get them filed, how you file things, how you get things started, because the VA system doesn't volunteer any information a lot of times, and a lot of times you ask questions, and you ask other veterans on how you get that. But answer your question fully, no, ma'am, I didn't ask anybody, which I was, I guess, ignorant to that.
Let me just ask you one other question. You indicated that maybe the VA should not farm out, but you could go to outside the system, and that might be more efficient. Most of the times when we have testimony, let's say women veterans, they say, well, we want to be served in the VA, but we don't like this, and that. So do you think that we should consider maybe giving, particularly in some areas, an opportunity to go to the outside? I mean, I know you can, but making sure you know that you can.
Yes, ma'am. I would say I think you should be able to give more opportunity. I think it should be put in a form of documentation when you're being treated as common knowledge, same way as the handbook they hand out. I think that should be probably wrote in there somewhere. You have options as due to the VA system, or you can request outsourced services. Presently, now I've been dealing with the VA system for a little over 2 years now, going to the oncology department at the Dorn VA. I'm well satisfied with my doctor I have, and I give him credit, as Dr. Babcock. He retired from private practice after 30 years, and I guess he wanted to serve his veterans or either work somewhere that dealt with veterans, and he goes 3 days at the Dorn VA and worked there as an oncology. When I first started, I actually got him the first week he come into the system, which I think that was something the Lord had planned altogether. And he's a real good Christian man. He said there's not a night that he doesn't go to bed at night and pray for me. But after all his works and what I've learned through the VA system medically, they have to request and get certain medication or certain different treatments to be done for cancer. He has done well at what he's doing. Recently, I'm acquiring now, after I've been there working for 2 years, and now from my last scan I had a couple of weeks ago, the spots on my lungs, a liver, and a new spot has came up now in the abdominal area that they have grown and multiplied. And I'm presently getting ready to go back on chemo in the next week. But I'm looking for outside services now. I've acquired information now through the MSU, well, the MUSC out of Charleston, which is another cancer research. They have ability to do a lot more scientists to research different cancer and be able to offer more availability to treat me a lot better than what the VA is.
Yes.
And I have applied and checked on it, and hopefully I can get payment due from the VA to be able to go to that hospital and try something new, you know, because I am talking about my life.
Mhm.
And like you said, no one knows the exact moment that the Lord's going to call you home.
Mhm.
But you also got sense enough to know that try to do best of while you're here and stay as long as you can. And I'm at the process now that where I'm in the getting the information together to them, so they can look at my case and see what they can do. And it's always good to have another option because, you know, I am talking about myself and my life and my family. And I'm sure each one of y'all here in this room now would do the same thing. If it was you in my shoe, you will look for other things because I've been doing this for 2 years now, and it has worked pretty good. But I think I'm at the end of the line of where I'm at now with the VA system,
Yes, sir.
and I'm having to go outside of that.
Thank you. My time is up, but let me just say, I want to recommend a couple of the hospitals in my area. I have a couple of good ones. One, Shands have the proton beam, and Mayo, they have some excellent work. So let me yield back the balance of my time, but I'll make sure I get you that information.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Huelskamp, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this hearing today. And Mr. Coates, I would like to apologize on behalf of a failed system that has created such pain for you. And I know the words probably don't mean much, but I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for coming here today. This probably wasn't easy. But in your testimony, I do note you do mention 4 different doctors, Dr. Verma, Dr. Nauman, Dr. Kim, and a Dr. Sarbal. Do you know if any of these doctors or related staff have faced any punishment or discipline for the failures in this situation?
Thank you for the compliment on. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any discipline. I would say out of 2 doctors, and that 4 I've mentioned, will be one, Dr. Verma. She had 3 occasions to set me up a consult, January, March, and May. Upon seeing Dr. Newman my first time in that same year, he immediately looked over the information, set me a consult with Dr. Kim, the GI surgeon, which I think he should have set me up with probably a different department that handled the colonostomies. I know it's something to do with the gastrology department, but he should have set me up with someone other than a GI surgeon. But he did make effort, and I give him credit for that because he's the only one on the first initial meeting. Dr. Kim was the GI surgeon I mentioned. She could have done a lot better than what she did if you missed my prior information about that. As far as the procedure she could have done my first visit with her and delayed it further. The last doctor was the one who actually done the colonostomy, and he done a real good job, and he was the chief doctor that done that, and he was very simple to me and my family about that. And after that, he would see me in the hospital getting treatment. He'd come up and talk to me and ask how everything's going, you know, everything. But now I've learned that he has left the system, and they've lost a great man from that down at the VA, at Dorn. He called me and a couple weeks before he left, and he said, Barry, I said, I just want to let you know that I'm leaving the system here at the VA. He didn't mention where he was going, but he asked me how I was doing, which is very fortunate, for a doctor to give a report like that. But
Mr. Coates, your interaction with other VA staff other than the doctors, can you describe that? And was it simply taking up the appointments, or was there any visits with them, any attempts to help you move through the morass of bureaucracy? And can you describe that as well for the committee?
You referring to appointments as far as what was set up for consults?
Well, any other staff? I mean, you mentioned the doctors and those that you thought really went above and beyond the call of duty, and those that perhaps did not. What about other staff at this center? I mean, were they helpful? Were you had to fight your own way through the process? Can you describe that a little bit more?
Well, I'd say yes and no to that answer. They were ones who were helpful, but they only had a limited source. And the ones that wasn't trying to be helpful, they really didn't care. And I can say that from knowledge of record that I received from the VA upon the GI surgeon from pulling her notes after she learned of the result from my colonoscopy. I had a meeting with her that same day at 1 o'clock or 1:30. And she came into the office, and that's the same woman that I had words with on the first initial meeting. And the only thing she could say was, "Mr. Coates, I'm so sorry. I did not expect that." I looked at her and I told her, I said, "See there, I told you I was hurting." I said, "From now on, you need to start listening to your veterans and doing more for them on your first initial visit. And that way, you can look back and say, I done the best thing I could do, because I told her the same thing. That I looked up things that she could have done, and she didn't do it. And if she had have done, it would have been a little sooner." And the only thing she could say, "I'm sorry." Well, sorry doesn't change that, and nothing happened to her. No punishment came upon her. Learning from other surgeons in that same department, I can't reveal their names, but because they work in that department, they told me that her policy changed after that, to where now that if any veteran comes in that has any bleeding or pain in the rectum area, that she immediately sets them up for consult for the colonoscopy. So I am thankful that I had to be the one to suffer to get that done. There are other veterans that won't suffer now. But she has been there. She was a seasoned doctor. And I think the lack of her ability, not her knowledge, because she had the knowledge to know what was going on, but the lack of care, I don't really know what it was. But there was a lot of things that she could have done more than what she did, and she didn't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. I appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank you.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really want to thank you for holding this hearing today. It's clearly a very important one. And Mr. Coates, I want to thank you for your testimony this morning. And truly, on behalf of this committee and our nation, I really want to apologize for the care that you received, or the care that you did not receive. And clearly, you agreed to serve our nation, and we agreed to take care of you when you came home, and we did not hold up our end of the bargain. And so I truly want to apologize to you. And I am the ranking member on the Health Subcommittee here for veterans. And when I learned of this, I actually wrote a letter to Dr. Benishek, who chairs the Subcommittee on Health, and was very obviously saddened by what I had learned about 19 preventable deaths. And I even question 19 preventable deaths. I mean, really, 19? I'm sure, I believe in my heart of hearts that there are probably more than 19, but 19 that we know about. So I am, very, very grateful that we are having this hearing today, and it is incumbent on all of us here to make sure that the VA is held accountable for what has happened and is accountable to you, Mr. Coates, and to the other men and women who have served our country and who have not received the proper care. I just wanted to ask you, we've already asked a lot of questions around this, but during the time that you have gone through, were you aware of any recourse that you could take, or did anyone suggest to you, is there someone in the VA that you could reach out to you, a patient advocate, anything like that during the course of these delays?
No, ma'am.
And I know that you mentioned just in your last answer that Dr. Kim ultimately apologized to you for her lack of diagnosis and care. But have you had any formal apology from the VA?
None.
And in your experience, again, how would you describe, I guess I want to say, sort of the bedside manner in terms of how you were treated? Clearly there were these delays, but did you experience from any VA employees or doctors that you encountered any sensitivity or concern about your frustration?
Yes and no answer to that. No to a couple of the physicians that I had, and yes to a couple of physicians that I had. I mentioned, I think, briefly those ones that I mentioned. Lack of concern. I look at it this way, and I've been going through the VA for quite a few years now, since early 90s. Same hospital. And you see a lot of different things going there from different physicians and things like that. You got physicians that care about people, and you got physicians that look at it as just a job to do. You got nurses and other officials there that look at it the same way. You got some that cares for the veteran themselves and enjoy what they do. And then you got some that does it for a job. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people in America today. They don't look at the honor of having something and appreciate it anymore. Not saying that anybody doesn't, but a lot of people don't. They come and go to work and go home. They want it for one thing and one thing only. And they do it for themselves. And I think if everybody worked together and done it and do something for each other like it's supposed to, and originally was set up, then we'd probably be a lot greater nation today.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. And I thank you for your testimony today. And it means a great deal. And I hope that through your testimony today, it will pave the way for other men and women who serve our country, that they will not be treated as you were through this process. So I am very, very grateful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Cook, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Coates, thank you very much to come here. I know this is tough on you and your family and everything like this. Last year I lost my sister with colon cancer. It's horrible for the family and everything else. She was much older than you are. Can I ask how old you are, sir?
44.
You don't have to tell me.
44 years young.
Okay. And we want you, obviously, you're expected to live much, much longer, and that's why this is so tragic. I want to ask the commander, Commander, you said that you think the VA has improved in certain areas, but the culture of the VA in terms of taking care of patients like Mr. Coates, it seems as though that is lacking. And do you share my concern about the culture, quite frankly, taking care of our veterans, taking care of the troops, and that this is and I'm not trying to preach here and everything, but, I spent a long time in the military. We've all had stories with people that where a grenade was thrown in there. Somebody would land on a grenade, get killed, and save 5, 6 people for the unit. Or going out on a battlefield, and somebody was wounded and taken back under fire. And we've all heard these horror stories, and very, very frustrating. And it seems as though the culture of the VA is such that there is not this sense of urgency or, hey, we've got to take care of this veteran. This is general quarters, and if you could just comment, and maybe it's just me, but after I have reached the breaking point on this where, excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. The gentlewoman from Texas talked about, I believe it was her or Julia, talked about we expect more for somebody that has signed up to do their duty, the veterans, in return from that's what they're there for. That's their mission. So I finally got around to my question. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It is continuity. As I go around the country visiting these hospitals, you can tell the ones that are the caring ones, just as Mr. Coates stated. You have where they're there really for the patients, and others are there to get a paycheck. And that is a difference. And I think that comes from the top down. VA needs to be accountable from the top down, through the secretary, through the undersecretary, all the way down to the directors and to the chief of staff. I've seen some great chiefs of staffs and other ones that are just there biding their time until they retire.
This is probably the most bipartisan committee, I think, in Congress. And I chaired the Veterans Committee in California. It was very bipartisan. And I don't think it's a Democrat or a Republican. I really, really think it's a culture that is not ingrained. All talk is cheap. But in terms of action, we talked about the suicides. We talked about all these, we go on and on and on. And it's like business as usual. And we cannot tolerate that. And maybe, maybe we do have to fire people, but we're certainly should not give them merit increases and all those things that go along with it, particularly in light of the IG investigations and everything else. If somebody is not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of, as I said earlier, taking care of our veterans, not just on the battlefield, but after they come back, then somebody deserves to be replaced or fired and have somebody in there that understands that's the primary mandate. If you could comment briefly. I only have 11 seconds.
I agree. I mean, just as in the military, you disobey an order, you get court-martialed.
That's right.
Here, we've seen instances where they've been some reprimands, but they're still on a job.
That's
and
right.
Others that are allowed to resign, and then there's nothing.
That's right. You have a rank structure, but that rank structure, your primary responsibility is to take care of everyone under you. And if you don't, that's why you're the first one out the helicopter if you're in command. You're going to get drilled. That's just the way it is, and I'm afraid that is not carried over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Mr. O'Rourke, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for Mr. Coates, your testimony and the answers to the questions posed so far has been so powerful, so clear, so honest. It really, the questions that are left that I have are really for the VA for ourselves, for this committee, for this country. What are we going to do now that we know the consequences of lack of access, of delay and ultimately denial, really is what we're talking about in care, and lack of accountability. So will just use my time to personally and on behalf of the veterans that I have the honor of representing in El Paso, thank you for your service, for your courage, for your testimony in being here today and focusing our attention on something that we desperately need to fix. So thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walorski. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Coates, I sit here and I think you are an example of the finest America has to offer. And it seems so petty to sit here and apologize on behalf of a bureaucratic system that is broken. But I do apologize. I am so sorry to you and your family sitting here of what you've gone through, and that you're going to have to stand and be an advocate for the rest of these veterans. And I promised my veterans in my district when I ran for Congress that they answered the call. They did what this nation asked them to do. And it was my turn to fight for them. That's what we do on this committee. We fight for the right of veterans to get the benefits they were promised, to be treated with the best care. I sit here as a freshman lawmaker, so frustrated that there's a bureaucracy that's out of control. And if this happened in a civilian world where negligence was proven time and time again, we would be in the streets with signs saying, shut them down. It's an outrage, is what it is. This is an outrage. And so I just joined the rest of my colleagues here. This isn't a partisan issue. This is an American disaster that we have sat here and witnessed for me probably 16 months. And if I could change your circumstance, I would. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Thank you.
My dad was a veteran that died of colon cancer. This is so personal to me. And as a committee, I can tell you right now what the VA is going to say when they sit here. They're going to say what the chairman read in his opening remarks. They're going to give us long, dramatic answers, and nothing is going to change unless we in this Congress, on the House and the Senate side, decide to stand up and take on one of the biggest issues in this nation, which is this negligence toward taking care of the people that fight for freedom, fought for liberty, and allow us to sit and serve in a place called the U.S. Congress. And I just want to say today, I hope that your testimony, I hope that your advocacy, and the truth of what you're saying changes the culture. It's changed the culture in this room, I can tell you that. But my prayer is for you and your family.
Thank you.
And that together we can stand and change the culture in this country and say that today was a different day in the history of this VA. I don't know how they sleep at night. I really don't. But I can tell you that we are your brothers and sisters to stand and fight for you in every way that we possibly can.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And to the American Legion, sir, you guys come in here faithfully. Every single time there's hearings, you and the many other advocacy organizations for the VA and for our veterans. And I just want to commend you for consistently coming, consistently telling the story, consistently being eyes and ears for all of us that have decisions to make and hopefully can improve a failed system. I so much appreciate what you do in your world and standing consistently for veterans. But you know, this is so personal to me today because I had to advocate for my dad, and I could, and I did. And we did everything we could possibly do, all the way down to the wire. And that's what I'm going to do for you, Mr. Coates. And for the veterans of my district, I'm going to stand here and continue to fight every day until we change a broken system. So God bless you.
Thank you.
And together, let's change this system so no other veteran ever, ever has to do what you're going through and your family as well. And you are in our thoughts and prayers. We'll stand with you through this as you continue to go through this process. But God bless you for being here today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Mr. Ruiz, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, Mr. Coates, apologize again for the missed diagnoses that occurred in your case. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for your honor, your dignity. Thank you for being a voice for all those other misdiagnoses that has occurred. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and I see here that the ER doc recommended a colonoscopy. That was the right thing to do. It is unacceptable, and someone who pursues excellence in medical care, it's very infuriating to know that a gentleman who comes in with rectal bleeding at any point did not have a rectal exam or an endoscopy or any other diagnostic study that would have detected your rectal nodules. I think that what we need to do now, and you know, I look at my colleagues, Mr. Cook and Ms. Wolarski, and I thank you for your passion, and I'm sorry to hear about your father as well. And Mr. Cook, I can only imagine your memories of those soldiers who have given of themselves and their lives to protect others. And I thank you for your service. It's very strong, coming from the heart. And I believe this I say this to my colleagues, is that in this individual case, we have missed a diagnosis, and I hope that our committee does not miss the diagnoses that we must pursue in order to remedy this, to determine systematically whether or not we have more medical errors, more complaints from patient care, and more litigations that were found successful to the VA versus any private healthcare system that we would consider the gold standard, because we not only expect the gold standard, we expect our VA system to be beyond the gold standard, because our veterans are beyond the gold standards of our citizenry in our country. And so if there's a study or if there is a commission that we would be able to start as a committee to compare and contrast, to determine if there is a systematic increase of maltreatment, misdiagnoses, then I would be very much inclined to look at that diagnosis and take adequate treatment, because we missed a diagnosis in this individual case. I want to make sure that the rectal nodule and cancer of our VA system gets removed as well. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Bilirakis, you recognize for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate so very much. And sir, thank you very much for your service, and you're an extraordinary individual. Thank you for coming today and sharing your story. I wanted to ask, sir, the VA has an ethical and legal obligation to disclose to patients adverse or potentially harmful events that have been sustained in the course of the patient's VA care. I know the gentlelady touched on this, and I want to ask once again, sir, were you notified and informed of your rights and recourse?
To my knowledge, no, sir.
Say that again, sir. I'm sorry.
To my knowledge, no, sir.
No, sir. Okay. And I know in your statement and your testimony, you may have mentioned this in the opening statement, and forgive me, I was a little late for the meeting, but you state, and I quote, "The gross negligence of my ongoing problems and crippling backlog epidemic of the VA medical system has not only handed me a death sentence, but ruined my quality of life." That is simply heartbreaking to hear. So would you like to elaborate some more? I want to give you the opportunity to, if you will.
As far as ruining the quality of my life?
Quality of life, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Um, yes, it has dampened my quality of life to a great deal. Other than what I've mentioned earlier about still having to go on with chemo treatments, and for now over 2 years now, and looking for other avenues. But you know, I have other family members other than myself to look at, and like any one of us here, you know, you have children and you have grandchildren. And I have children and I have grandchildren. Um, the question is, and you don't never know how much longer you have to better enjoy them and them enjoy you. You take one day at a time. That's my philosophy. You live every day as it going to be your last day. And once you do that, then the next day will come and you start again. And you live that like it's your last day. And this has dampened a lot of what I could do, a lot of enjoyment. You know, I'm 44 years old. I'll be 45 in May of this year. But I'm fairly young. And a lot of things I can't do. I can't get out and enjoy, you know, playing with my grandchildren. I can't enjoy, you know, doing things that I could as a normal 45-year-old man. A lot of things has been taken from me because of that. If, you know, I wanted to do things as far as, example, if I want to get out there and play baseball with my grandchildren and do running or anything, I'm not capable of doing that. I can't lift but so much weight because of I have a permanent ostomy from that. If I decided I wanted at my age, you know, probably look at me and say I'm crazy if I want to have another child. I can't do that now. You know, that option there's gone. And there's a lot of other things that, you know, I enjoy doing that I used to do that I can't do now. And it has affected my life a lot and my family's life a lot. And you know, I look at what my children, my grandchildren look at me and they probably look at it and think, so why can't why does my dad can't enjoy himself? And my grandchildren say, well, why can't you come out and play with me and do things like other dads or either granddads do with them? So that's something I'm going to have to live with and deal with the rest of my life. And hopefully by being here today that maybe I'm saving another father, another mother from having to go through the same tragedy that I went through and have a better quality of life of doing it.
I will tell you, sir, you are a tremendous role model for those children and grandchildren. I know they are very proud of you. I have one question for Mr. Dillinger, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I understand from your written testimony that the American Legion has been waiting for 5 months to receive a report from VA regarding the Jackson VA Medical Center. Is it common for your organization to experience lengthy wait times to get information from the department?
Yes, we do see lengthy delays with the fact that everything is centralized in Washington, D.C. They try to do everything out of Washington. We think it's very important that they empower the medical centers and the directors to be able to address crises in a timely and quick manner.
Thank you very much, and we've got to do something about that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your testimony, and I appreciate it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Negrete McLeod, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Dr. Benishek has not returned. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Coates, thank you so much for your service to our country. What branch were you in again?
Army.
Oh, fantastic. And again, On behalf of the American people, I certainly apologize, as so many other members of this committee have, to you for the treatment that you got from the VA system. Let me ask you this question. Do you think, if you were given an option to be able to go outside the VA system and have it compensated to the VA for medical care, would you have taken that option?
Knowing what I know now, yes, I would.
Do you think other veterans ought to have that option, that if there are such delays in the system, if they're unable to do proper diagnosis in something as simple as blood in the stools, that veterans ought to have choices?
Yes, sir, I think they should. And the reason for that is, if you get in a situation like that, when you approach somebody's health and their quality of life or life or death situation, and even under civilian medicals, you have a choice of what doctor you want to go to. And under the VA system, I think you should have the same opportunity there. What health care you want to use, what physician you want to use, what specialty physicians you want to use. And especially when you get in a situation where you have a backlog like there was, and the bad and the sad part of it, and I think this comes from Mr. Miller. Remember here, I think there was money allotted to the VA system at Dorn back in 2011, and it was misused. As according to what they say,
Was over $1 million.
correct. And no one has answered for that yet. Don't know where it went. They said it was misappropriated. Well, what happened to it, and who's responsible for that? Why didn't it go where it went? We can't answer that, but we can find out why and make sure it doesn't happen again. Second of all, that was to help the backlog of those patients. And the sad part of it is, that was during the time I was going through that in 2011.
Let me ask you this, in part, you know, the reality is you're a victim of a system that did not care as much as they should have about their patients. Do you think that culture or that system exists because of the fact that they don't see themselves competing with, that you're their only choice, that they don't see themselves competing with anybody else, that if you had an option to go outside the system, and that they would have to pay for that, and that was your freedom to make that decision, do you think that they would have handled your case any differently?
I think they probably would have. Anytime it comes down to, and I'm not the only one who probably knows this, and anybody across America has known this, when it comes to spending government money, there's a lot of things that they like to spend it on, and there's a lot of things that they pitch pennies about. If it's for national defense and it needs to be done, well, they jump on it. If it's something saving somebody's life, they get in a big debate about it. Why does it need to be spent? Where does it need to be spent at? And we've run across this in, here recently in the past few year, debates in the House and debates in the Senate of the debt ceiling being raised and allocated money for where it goes. But if reality, and you look into it, and you look at what we spend for different small items, and you could probably request this information from somewhere, and I've heard this from other sources, what we pay for little small things like a hammer, a toilet seat, you know, $150, $350, you know, when you can go to anywhere and buy it for 10, 12 bucks. We spend money where we think it needs to be at and where it not needs to go. And the sad part of it is we don't get choices like that of knowing where it goes and where it don't go. There are other people who have the authority to rest upon where it goes at.
Well, Mr. Coates, again, sorry about your advanced rectal cancer. As a result of substandard medical care by the VA, and I just want to say that that they have received, the system has received a higher appropriation every single year. And so it's the question of how that money is utilized. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I have a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to ask them. You've given of your time today. Your story is more than compelling. I, like the other members of this panel, want to say thank you for your service in and out of uniform. Ms. Brown does have a final question. I would ask the committee if we could, after Ms. Brown asks her question, we could move to the second panel. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. My question is really for the commander. My question is, you know, I've been on this committee for 22 years, as I mentioned, and you've been here, I believe, almost as long as, more than 10 years. But my question, some of the members say that the VA system is broken. I don't feel like it's broken. I feel like we need to do what we need to do to fix it. But I have traveled to, I can't tell you how many hospitals. I was in one, there's going to be one soon, yesterday all day. But the point is that my feeling is that the VA people that I met with and talked to, I think they really care. And it can't be just my district. It can't be just those areas in Florida or Tampa that I've been to, or Jacksonville or Gainesville or Lake City. I mean, I've been to California, and, you know, I met with the people there, and when I went out there, I found out we had 400 units that just was sitting there, and people could be using them. So the point is, on a 1 to 10, if you're going to evaluate the system, and I know we got problems, we're sitting here listening to the problems, and I really think we need to be able to go outside the system to get certain services. How would you evaluate the system?
It's a great question. I really believe I need to break that into two aspects. First being the medical care that you receive at the medical centers and at the community-based outreach clinics. I think that is an 8 to a 9, because they, as you mentioned, they really do care. They really want to help. But where I think it's broken is when you talk about the oversight on the works of the VA central offices and regional offices. I would rate that at about a 5. They need a lot of improvement. Where we see most of our problems are at the regional and central offices, not at the medical facilities themselves. Yes, there are instances, just like Mr. Coates, but the overall system there, I think they're wanting to do better. And just as a director, tried to do, you know, wherever you see blood at this point, you get a colonoscopy. They're addressing these.
That's common sense.
That's common sense. But when you have a failure at the, just like during the Legionella in Pittsburgh, when they had a statement ready to go out, and they had to send it back to central office so that they could evaluate the statement, it never got released. It's such a bureaucracy.
Okay, so you're saying that part of the problem with the culture is that it is too, you don't have enough responsibility on the regional level?
I think regional, central area, yeah, central office area.
Okay, but I really find that this, you know, maybe in this particular case, the person, it could have been a cultural differences. As far as, I mean, I just can't imagine somebody not caring. I mean, I serve on this committee because I care. And I think people working in the VA, to just say that they work for a check is way beyond me. because these people have served us, and what we're doing is giving back. This is our opportunity to serve.
Ms. Brown, I have with me service officer or field service officer Lilly, and he's out there every day. He goes to these system-wide savings, and he goes to the regional and central offices. I'd like for him to make a comment on this also.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Commander, and thank you, Ranking Member Brown. I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about employees coming forward and trying to address the problem before it escalates. And I completely agree with you there, because what happens is there's this negative stigma of whistleblowers. That's what those employees become, or their former employees. So the local facilities on the local level need to be empowered to address crises when they happen. And that's not how it is right now. And that's what our commander was referring to when he was saying that it takes a long time for these facilities to address what's happened, because they have to get approval from Washington, D.C. And that's what we've seen in Pittsburgh, Jackson, Atlanta, all these different trips. The veterans are scared. They're nervous. They're afraid to go to their own healthcare system because they just don't know what steps the VA is taking to address the issue.
Well, thank you very much, and thank all of you for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, members, for holding your questions until the next panel. And thank you very much, Mr. Coates, for being here. Commander, thank you, and you're excused. I would say, members, we're going to switch up the witnesses, and we'll take VA next instead of waiting until the third panel. So we will be preparing the table for the second panel. Members, joining us at the second panel is Dr. Thomas Lynch. He's the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for Health and Clinical Operations and Management. Dr. Lynch is accompanied this morning by Dr. Carolyn Clancy. She's the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for Quality, Safety, and Value. Dr. Lynch, you're recognized for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, let me begin by saying that we have heard a compelling story. I need to recognize the fact that what we have heard is a sad story. Before I walked up here, I apologized to Mr. Coates. I told him that I am sorry for what happened. If he did not receive an institutional disclosure, I initiated that by extending my apology on behalf of VHA. I also commit that we will look into what happened so that we can understand and he can get a better explanation, and the explanation that he deserves. I was looking around. It appears that he's left the room. I did, and I want to publicly thank him for his service. I want to thank him for reminding us of what we are here for and for the people that we are serving through VHA and our healthcare system. I am going to go pretty much off script. I want to let you know that Dr. Clancy and I are here because I think we share a common value with you, sir, and with the committee. And that value is to provide quality care to our veterans. I would also suggest that we are here because we share common concerns, and those are concerns regarding harm that has occurred to veterans in our healthcare system. I think it is good that we hear these stories, that we not ignore when harm has occurred. They are powerful. We need to learn from them, and we need to do better. I think also I would like to acknowledge publicly that I think the relationship between VA and Congress has been a constructive relationship in the past. I think many good things have occurred in VHA healthcare because of the concerns you have expressed and because of the actions we have taken. In the late 80s, there were significant concerns about the quality of surgical care in the VA. The VA developed what was then called NSQIP, the National Surgical Quality Improvement Program. It's now called VASQIP. It gives us a risk-adjusted model to assess outcomes in our surgical programs. It is so powerful, it has been adopted by the American College of Surgeons and is now used to provide oversight and evidence to healthcare systems and to physicians to allow them to improve the services that they provide. In the mid-1990s, there were concerns expressed on behalf of Congress regarding the quality of our healthcare system. In response, the VA developed the electronic medical record. This is an advance that has now been adopted by the private sector. The VA has also moved towards looking at the way we deliver care and how we focus care with respect to prevention. Preventing illness, not necessarily treating illness. This means that we don't necessarily have to put people into hospitals. We can treat them as outpatients. It's a model that's now being adopted in the private sector. I want to go back, and I think I want to make one point from what had been my prepared statement, Mr. Chairman, and that is that over a third of our employees are veterans. And the fact that everyone in VA is constantly striving to eliminate the clinical and administrative errors that may occur. We strive, sir, to be transparent in disclosing what has happened. As a system, we have taken a lead in being transparent. We have taken a lead in clinical disclosure. We are not perfect, sir. We are a learning organization. When errors occur, we do try to express apologies to the involved patients and to their families. I think I will close with a statement from Ralph Gabero. He's the former CEO of the Mayo Regional Hospital in Dover, Foxcroft, Maine. I think he put it best, sir. To paraphrase, preventable patient deaths are a nightmare for our entire medical community. But our feelings, what we are going through, pales in relationship to what the families are dealing with, and we understand that, sir. We are now prepared to take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Your recent National Consult Delay Review disclosed 2 deaths in Arizona, but committee investigation show that it appears that it could be much worse than you know, or if you do know that it's worse than what the committee has been told. So I want to tell you about some information that we have received here in the committee as it relates to Phoenix. I've been made aware of internal emails from within the VA that suggest that Phoenix VA may have been using an unofficial electronic waiting list where veterans were placed on that unofficial list until an appointment became available. These lists were supposedly designed to give the appearance that veterans were only waiting for appointments for 24, 25 days or less, and they potentially contain thousands of names. In cross-referencing the two lists, it appears as though there could be as many as 40 veterans whose deaths could be related to delays in cares. Were you made aware of these unofficial lists in any part of your look back?
Mr. Chairman, I was not. And Mr. Chairman, I would say that I have tried to work with your committee. I have visited with your staff. I was in Atlanta. I was in Columbia. I was in Augusta when you made those visits. I have tried to share the information that we have gained as we are obtaining it. I know it's not perfect information, sir, but I know that there is a desire on your part to know that information as we obtain it. I am more than willing to meet with your staffers and take their information so that I can use it, sir. If I don't have that information, I can't act on it.
So your people had two lists, and they even kept it from your knowledge. So my question is, does that make you even internally question the validity of the information being utilized in your look back or your review?
At the moment, sir, it does not, but I am open. I am happy to meet with your staffers. I'm happy to look at the data so that we can understand it and see what the issues and the problems are.
I want to provide you with a request for a preservation order for all potential evidence at Phoenix. And I would also ask the Inspector General for Health Care, Mr. Day, to look into this issue as soon as possible. I will be putting a letter to you as quickly, but I make this as an official request on the record, and we are ready to assist by providing our evidence and any assistance that Dr. Day may need as he goes through. It's been mentioned a couple of times in here about Dorn being awarded a little over $1 million, $1.02 or some number like that, to help in the backlog of fee-basis colonoscopies. The money was provided in September of 2011. I have still not been able to get a solid answer where that money went, so I'm hoping that you might be able to provide an insight this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, I know that that information has passed through VHA. I took the opportunity to listen to the Deputy Secretary's hearing the other day. I know he has committed to increasing the communication with Congress and with this committee, and I support his efforts and will do what I can to get you the information that you need, sir.
So again, another piece of information the committee awaits. I specifically asked for a complete accounting of those dollars when I was at Dorn earlier this year. On the 22nd of February, in a health committee hearing, Dr. Benishek asked Dr. Petzel to provide a list of circumstances surrounding the removal of 6 SES employees over the last 2 years. Dr. Petzel promised at that hearing that he would provide that information at the end of that week. This is February 26th. It's been 6 weeks since the committee asked for the information. We have not received it. This information was referenced in a subcommittee on economic opportunity that was chaired by Mr. Flores, and by the way, Mr. Flores is absent today because he is at the memorial for Fort Hood in Texas. And the committee staff has made numerous requests. So I would also note that in your this statistic was also noted in your written statement for this hearing. So why is VA keeping this information from the committee when it was an entirely reasonable request?
Sir, I wish I had an answer for you that you would find acceptable. I can only repeat that I support the Deputy Secretary's efforts to get you the information in a timely fashion.
But, you know, I have a bill right now, Dr. Lynch, that gives the Secretary additional flexibility to fire SES employees. Out of the 320,000 employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs, we're only talking about 450 individuals. The Secretary is pushing back, saying that he has the tools and that he has, in fact, taken the necessary steps. And we're talking about 6 people, and we've been waiting months now to get that information. And I just, as the chairman and the subcommittee chairman and the ranking members, sit here just wondering why in the world it takes so long. In January, following my visit to Columbia and Augusta, which you were at, I wrote to follow up on the delays in care, I wrote a letter to the Secretary asking for specific information regarding consult backlogs at those facilities and others in general. And though I requested a response that it be provided within 30 days, I have yet to receive a response, an answer from the department. So I ask you again, as somebody who should be intimately involved in the preparation of the Secretary's response, when can the committee expect to receive that information?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, sir. I realize that you take this seriously. I realize that your committee takes their responsibility seriously. And I accept the fact that there can be a constructive relationship between the committee and the VA. And I hope to be part of that solution, sir, and not the problem.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to ask, I know we skipped over a panel, but I wanted to refer back to some of the testimony that I reviewed from Dr. Day, who spoke specifically around the problems in Columbia, around the consult backlog. And one of the indications that he gave was the availability of fee-based care, that it had been reduced. I wanted to just hear your comments on that and why fee-based care was reduced in Columbia.
I don't have the full explanation for that, Congresswoman. I believe the facility felt at the time they had the resources to solve the problem. In retrospect, they did not. I think, however, Congresswoman, that in the process of looking back over what happened, we have developed a tool that gives the facility, that gives the network, and that gives VA central office eyes on delays and helps us ask critical questions of a facility in terms of should they be using fee basis care. We have improved our fee basis process. We have implemented the PC3 process, which helps us interact with the community to obtain services. I think we have the ability to identify where our demand exceeds our capacity, to understand why that may be occurring, and as we move forward to effectively use fee basis.
Thank you. And this tool that you're speaking of, can you give me some more details about what that is? What triggers you to begin to look at it? How long do the backlogs have to be before you begin to put your eyes on the problem and try to rectify it?
I think, first of all, the answer is that's individual, but let me explain the tool to you. As we began to look back at our consults after the incidents in Columbia and Augusta, we observed that there were flaws in our consult process that allowed consults to remain open or unresolved. That put noise in our system, and it prevented us from trying to identify those facilities where there was need for alternatives such as fee basis care. Over the past year, after the incidents in Columbia and Dorn, we went back, we examined over 250 million consults since 1999 in VA. We identified where there were delays. We had to resolve those consults and make sure that they were closed appropriately and that services were provided. And in the process of doing that, we implemented new business rules that helped us separate what are clinical consults from what had become some administrative uses of that consult system. We are in the process of completing that review. It should be completed in the next month or two. With that and with new business rules, we will have the ability to look at a facility, to look at individual specialties within a facility, to take a look at trends in delays, and to ask critical questions whether the facility has the resources to address those delays, whether the facility thinks those delays are temporary, transient, or whether it's an indication of increasing delays, and to then work with the facility to decide, do we need to add more staff or do we need to use fee-basis services?
Thank you. Are you collecting any data as we speak, looking ahead? Talked a lot about looking to the past and what needs to be done for the future. But looking ahead, are you collecting data and benchmarks vis-a-vis consult backlogs throughout the VA? Obviously, we've determined there with some VISNs, there have been some real problems. But are we going to collect that data to understand the data, that data gets shared with the committee? And where are the trigger points that we can make an immediate fix to what potentially could be a very, very serious problem?
I think the answer to that is yes, Congresswoman. In fact, about 6 months ago, using some initial data that we were beginning to collect, we sent over $100 million out to the field for facilities to contract for fee-basis services. We reduced the wait time, the backlog at that point, by almost 50% or 50,000 patients. So we have begun to use that tool. I think we can also begin to use that tool to look at what I think is the critical issue when we look at access, and that is delayed care. We focus on 14-day access, but really, importantly, we need to look at where care is delayed. And we can set the filters on this system to look at delays at variable lengths of time, and as we get control of the system, slowly reduce backlog from 90 days to 60 days to 30 days based on the information that we'll get.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Huelskamp, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of follow-up questions, if I might. First, in reference to our previous conferee, Mr. Coates, are you familiar with the specifics of his situation?
I have not reviewed the specifics of his situation. I assure you I will.
Dr. Clancy, have you any familiarity with the situation?
Not before what I heard this morning. Not before what I heard this morning.
Okay, I would ask if you could also follow up on the situation in private discussions with Mr. Coates that currently VA is requiring him to drive almost 4 hours for some follow-up treatments instead of being able to receive it right close to home. Would you please follow up on that and see if that's indeed the case?
Absolutely.
Okay. Additionally, I'd like to ask a couple questions of Dr. Litch. What specific person at the VA Medical Center level is responsible for ensuring timely care is delivered to veterans?
Ultimately, it's the medical center director, sir, working with his quadrad, the director, the chief of staff, the chief of nursing, and the associate director who often deals with engineering and environment of care.
And then what specific person or position at the VISN is responsible for ensuring timely care?
Ultimately, it's the network director, sir. He or she works with the chief medical officer and with the quality medical officer.
And then at the VA central office level, who is responsible for timely care?
Ultimately, that would go to the office of the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations and Management and to Dr. Petzel.
And out of all the people and positions you've just named and anywhere from 20 to 40 deaths by delay of veterans. Do you know if anybody at all has received any disciplinary action whatsoever?
I believe that Dr. Petzel discussed disciplinary action the last time he was here. I believe we have identified 2 physicians in Memphis, which is another issue where there was discipline. There was discipline in Augusta as well as Columbia, and there was discipline in Atlanta.
Did anybody lose their job?
I can't answer that specifically, sir.
You don't have the information, or is it a refusal to?
No,
provide that?
honestly, I don't have the information, sir. If I did, I would share it with you. I guess I would, maybe in response, I understand your concern, I understand the chairman's concern regarding accountability, and I think that's important, and I think VA has some very prescribed purposes for that. I'm troubled a little bit by whether or not firing somebody is necessarily the answer. I think, as I mentioned earlier, almost 1/3 of our employees are veterans.
Would you be opposed to taking away their bonus?
Pardon?
Would you be opposed to taking away their bonus?
Can I answer, could I just continue for just a second?
No, I don't have time for that answer.
I think we need to be careful about punishing everybody for what may have occurred at 1 or 2 medical centers. I think, by and large, sir, we have good people who care for veterans, who deliver quality care, and I think in those circumstances, they should be rewarded. I don't think we should punish the system for what may be incidents that occurred at individual medical centers.
Lastly, Dr. Lynch, I'm looking at your handbook that provides procedures for disclosure of adverse events to patients.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty clear of the ethical requirements. Unwavering ethical obligation to disclose to patients harmful adverse events that have been sustained in the course of their VA care. Has this been disclosed to Mr. Coates?
It would appear from his testimony that it hasn't, sir. I think VA has taken a lead in this area. I don't think we're perfect, but I think we have a good system and it can be better.
And if one failed to disclose this, as apparently is the case to Mr. Coates, what is the punishment? And who is punished for failure to meet an unwavering ethical obligation?
Sir, at this point, I don't know. I need to understand the circumstances that occurred, and I will be looking into that.
And I appreciate the specifics on Mr. Coates, but the general question is, who is responsible for meeting this unwavering ethical obligation?
The handbook would tell you that it is the executive team of the hospital. It is the director, it is the chief of staff, it is the chief of nursing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Mr. O'Rourke, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Lynch, Mr. Coates made a very powerful case that the delay of service to a veteran can effectively mean denial of life-saving care to that veteran. And I think you have made the commitment to look at his case specifically, find out what you can learn from that, apply those lessons to improving the VA and specifically what happened with those specific doctors. And he relayed an anecdote or anecdotes of poor performance on behalf of a doctor, but he also showed us that there are some truly terrific public servants working for the VA. He mentioned the doctor who retired from private practice and is spending time within the VA because he cares about veterans and wants to make sure that they get the best care. I have found that to be the case in El Paso, that we have really wonderful doctors, terrific care for veterans who can get in my community and far too often in other parts of the country is that it's very hard to get into the VA and get an appointment and see a doctor. Anecdotally, I've heard from veterans who served as far back as World War II, who need simple procedures like cortisone treatment, who have to, as Mr. Hulskamp just described, travel 4 or 5 hours to the nearest VA hospital in Albuquerque to get that care. They decide not to get the care, and they end up either suffering, choosing an alternative, or just going without. I've spoken to countless veterans who delay or just do not receive appropriate treatment, procedures, or surgeries for these same reasons. That anecdotal information has been borne out by the recent SAIL report that the VA OIG recently produced that showed that El Paso is ranked 123 out of 128 VHA facilities for access to care. When we drilled down into the numbers a little bit further, we found that as recently as 6 months ago, only 18% of veterans seeking to make an appointment were actually able to get an appointment within a reasonable period of time, a standard that you all set for yourselves. So for those 82 other out of every 100 veterans trying to make an appointment, they can't get in and find care. So, you know, Mr. Hulskamp approached this, I think rightfully so, from a perspective of accountability and what do we do when people don't perform, when veterans don't get access, when we have these poor outcomes. To look at the other side of the question, what are you missing in resources to be able to provide the access that we need to hire the very best doctors, or in El Paso's case, enough doctors so that veterans can get in and get an appointment? What are we not providing to you and to the VA that you need to be able to turn this situation around?
Dr. Clancy?
So first, I want to say to you and your colleagues here that we very much appreciate the privilege and opportunity and honor of serving the men and women who have effectively written a blank check to this country. There's no higher calling, really, in medical care delivery. The issue of timely access is one we also take seriously. So to the extent that you have additional information that we haven't seen, we would love to see and work on that with you.
Here's the thing, and I appreciate what you just said, but I've spoken to Dr. Petzel about this. You all have measured it and seen the outcomes and the lack of service. I'm with Ms. Brownlee and others who question whether the number of preventable deaths is really accurate. Who knows how many of those in El Paso who were not able to get an appointment or who were told they had to make a 10-hour round trip and chose not to have the procedure. Who knows what their outcomes were? I don't know if we're effectively measuring that. What I want to know, and I've tried to do this in the most cooperative, polite, diplomatic fashion I can think of, what I want to know is what you're going to do to turn that situation around, and if you need something additional from me as a member of Congress, from us as a committee, from the House and Senate in terms of appropriating resources. What are you missing that is preventing you from delivering the standard of care that our veterans should be able to expect?
What we are working on right now are new programs to improve our ability to schedule appointments in a timely fashion. In addition to that, particularly for folks who live in rural areas where traveling great distances often is a big challenge, we're looking into other options when it's feasible. Obviously, if you need an injection or a procedure, you can't do that remotely, but we are looking at a variety of telehealth options, sometimes for video consultation. It seems to be very, very effective way to improve access for people who have mental health appointments, and also other venues so that we can be able to get people in faster. And I will personally follow up with Dr. Petzel about your request. I wanted to make one other comment just about the rankings. If you have 152 hospitals or centers in a system, there will be a number 1 and a 152. I think the real question is 123, how does that stack up against the private sector, and what is the gap between best possible care and the care?
Then use the other metric I gave you, which is 82 out of every 100 veterans trying to make an appointment in El Paso cannot get in a reasonable amount of time, a standard which you set. And I have asked Mr. Petzel publicly, we've talked to the office privately, when can we get something in writing that will tell us when you will be able to meet the standard of care that you yourselves have set for the veterans in El Paso and the veterans all around this country? And I am still waiting for the reply. So I'm going to ask you again publicly to please work with Dr. Petzel and our office to get us that reply. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. Dr. Benishek.
Thank you.
Chairman of the Health Subcommittee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for being here this morning. Frankly, this makes me really angry. All right, I mean, Mr. Coates was here testifying about this care at the VA where he's going to die. And I'm a general surgeon. I do colonoscopies. I did colonoscopies at the VA. This man did not receive the standard of care. And it's very frustrating for me to be here and have people calmly explain to me how they're working really hard to make things happen. And when there's not an emergency, this is an emergency. This gentleman did not receive the standard of care. All right? He did not receive an apology. It's hard for me to understand, when I asked Dr. Petzel what are you doing about this kind of stuff? So 6 people have been disciplined. And then I can't even get an answer from him as to which people and why. So how can I believe that the VA is serious about putting a stop to this stuff when I ask a simple question and I can't even get an answer to it? It's very frustrating to me that we have to come up with some sort of a legislative fix for how you people manage your department. I mean, it should be a management decision that, a physician who is not getting a colonoscopy when people have rectal bleeding or blood in the stool, this has been the standard of care for 30 years. And, for not even to get a consultation for a colonoscopy for a year, and then to get 6 months before he's actually, from what I can understand from the timing, 6 months. This is an emergency. If I see somebody in my office with rectal bleeding, they get a colonoscopy like the next day or within the week. And I don't know, I just get so frustrated by people like you that come here and calmly say we're going to fix it. And it never gets fixed.
Congressman, I'm a surgeon by training. I have spent the last 30 years working in the VA system, working with veterans, training residents, working with medical students. I'm angry as well, sir. I share your anger. I have been working for the last year, since I have been here in central office, to put together the tools that give us what we need to manage our system in a fashion so we can identify where there are delays and we can...
I understand. See, you calmly answer me.
I'm not calmly answering you, Congressman.
But I don't see any progress, Dr. Lynch. I don't see any progress. I mean, all I asked with Dr. Petzel was for some things here. We don't see where you're actually fixing it. All we do is get calm responses from people that are assuring us that we're actually doing it, but we don't see any progress. And when I see a case like that case that was presented here this morning earlier by Mr. Coates, I just can't stand. What are you doing? I mean, what mechanism do you have to find out about stuff like this? I mean, what happened to that doctor? Why wasn't she working at the standard of care? I mean, these are the kind of questions that we need answers to. We don't ever get them. So I'm very disappointed with the quality of the management of the VA. I mean, I worked at the VA for 20 years myself. I think that the VA has made tremendous improvements over the last 20 years. There's no doubt about it, and I applaud you for doing your career there. But coming from that system where I worked as a physician, and I come here, and knowing, how the bureaucrats work there, the physicians, to me, didn't have enough input as to how things were done. It was the bureaucrats that decided about a lot of this stuff. So I'd be happy to work with you to give you my insight as to how to do this better.
Congressman,
it's great.
I'd be happy to meet with you.
Let's
Dr.
make it happen.
Clancy and I would both be happy to meet with you, sir.
I'll yield
Yes.
back my time and hopefully
And
we'll
I do
follow
want to
up.
be clear that we both share your anger and are very, very upset. And we know that we can't take that back. It can't be undone. So a young man who will die prematurely, we get that. But what it inspires us to do is to work harder to make sure that we don't do it again and that we've got a system in place to make it foolproof so that we...
Well, my frustration is that how can I tell what's happening when I can't even get a simple answer to a simple question from Dr. Petzel? Thank you.
Ms. Titus, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Mr. Lynch, I'm sure you're aware that the IG is currently investigating the death of Sandy Neekum at the VA hospital out from Las Vegas. That investigation came at the request of the chairman and myself. It's taken a while. We hope to get the results soon, but I just wonder when the results come, or to this investigation or any, what you do to follow up, how you assure us that you have made the changes, implemented the recommendations, Could you comment maybe specifically about the Las Vegas case and also generally?
I can't comment specifically about the Las Vegas case. I have not seen the OIG's report yet. I can tell you that when those reports come in, I do read them, I do look at the recommendations, and we do have a process for tracking to make sure those recommendations are acted upon and closed.
Could you elaborate on that process for tracking them, and so we can be sure that there's transparency and accountability, and I can go back to my constituents and say, this was the problem and this has happened to correct it?
There is an office in VHA whose specific responsibility is to work with the OIG. They obtain those reports, they work with the OIG until such time as he accepts the actions that have been taken and closes the recommendation.
And that's public?
Yes, that is public information in terms of what was the response of the VA health system and the follow-up and so forth. So I think we can both commit to you that we will follow up with you once that report is done. I want to stress, though, that we don't wait for the Inspector General. The Inspector General is a very valuable resource and a source of information for us, but we have many internal processes. So our National Center for Patient Safety, for example, routinely is collecting information about adverse events and near misses, in other words, circumstances that set people up for errors. I've heard a lot of concern from all of you this morning, and we share that about harms to patients and patient safety. And I'd love to tell you that we can build an error-free system, and that is not possible. What we can do and are strongly committed to doing is identifying things at the earliest possible phase so they can be fixed and the much longer-term and more serious consequences can be prevented. So we pay a lot of attention to the IG reports, to reports by the GAO, but we also have our own internal processes where we're relying on every single employee who works at VA to let us know. It's called Stop the Line. You see something, say something. If you see something that could be unsafe, we need to hear about it. And you need to let people know so that we can act on it and together across the system learn about it.
Can you tell us then, and I appreciate that, I think that's a good thing that you have, but if something is being done to follow up on the Sandy Neekum case independent of the report that we're waiting on?
I can get back to you with that. I'm not familiar with the specifics of that, but we'll definitely get back to you.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Could you tell me why the surveillance video that day in the hospital that showed Ms. Neekum, who was an elderly lady who was in severe pain and ended up dying, was erased, deleted? How did that occur?
The only explanation I have heard is that after 30 days, the tapes are overwritten, and we don't have that information. And I understand that I don't know the relationship between your request and when that tape was erased. I think from our standpoint, it's unfortunate. We would like to have seen what happened as well.
Wouldn't you think, though, as a matter of principle and good business practice, if a death occurred in your facility and you had video of that death and it 30 days, man, I can understand if it was 24 hours maybe it got, but 30 days before it got taped over?
If I recall the case which is now coming back, I don't believe Ms. Neekum died that day. I believe she died subsequently following hospitalization. So I think the concern was that her care was delayed in the emergency department, and there was a delay in her receiving radiology services. She went home and was subsequently admitted to another facility and died at that time. So it wasn't that we had a death in the facility at that time, which I absolutely agree with you, Congressman, would have required that we review those videotapes and look at them.
The GAO, in their written testimony for this morning's hearing, alleges that oversight of the implementation of VHA's business rules has been limited and has not included independent verification of VAMC actions. So my question to you is, would the department be willing to increase oversight of the new business rules and pursue independent verification of VA's medical center implementation?
I did read the GAO's testimony, sir. I'm not sure that we agree that there is value to auditing of the facilities. We think that we have provided adequate training. We think that we have provided the education that the facilities need to implement those. We know that the facilities have begun to implement and use consult management teams. We feel very strongly that the consult tool that is resulting from this review will give us that individual oversight by facility and by specialty.
And they also allege in their statement that the department did not require medical centers to document how they addressed unresolved consults that were open greater than 90 days. Is that true?
That's true, sir. But we felt we had a process defined that identified which consults could be closed. We had a process defined that when there were individual patient consults which remained unresolved, that related to clinical care, that we had a process and an expectation of our medical centers that those would be reviewed individually.
In their written statement this morning, GAO references one VA medical center where specialty care providers have allegedly been instructed to discontinue consults for appointments that are not needed within 90 days and to track these consults outside the consult system and resubmit them closer to the date that they are needed. Is this an acceptable practice?
We have a process as we implement new business rules that will identify consults for what we term future care. Future care would be somebody who perhaps had an endoscopy.
So the answer to that question is yes, it is an acceptable practice.
The answer to that is yes, we have a process in place to be able to identify those and be sure that we have eyes on those future care consults, sir.
So we'd have a dual track list.
No, sir, we have an electronic process that follows those and kicks them out at the appropriate time back into our system so that we're aware that an endoscopy or a consult needs to be scheduled at the appropriate time.
Can you respond to the comment made in the IG's written statement that there seems to be a lack of focus on health care delivery as priority one at VA medical facilities, as evidenced by the length of time that it often takes to fill a vacant position? I think any one of us that goes to a VA medical center for a visit are often not surprised anymore by the number of people that have the word acting before their name, or that there are positions that are important that are vacant. But could you respond to those comments?
Yes, sir. First of all, I think if we look back through VHA, the system that we currently have was initially developed around 1940 by Omar Bradley and by Dr. Paul Hawley. It focused on clinical care, it focused on academic affiliation and the education of medical students and residents, and it focused on the value of research. I realize that healthcare has changed. I respect the IG's recommendations and thoughts. I think that we do need to re-examine our system, but I would disagree that I think we are ignoring clinical care in favor of research or education. I think they are both critical components of what we do in VHA. The research that we have done has helped to improve patient care and the care we deliver. I can give you two recent examples. There was VHA research, VA research on the treatment of PTSD that has resulted in new treatments for patients with PTSD, as well as tools for identifying TBI. There was study on the use of the drug prazosin and its value in patients with PTSD that has been implemented not only in VA, but also in the private sector. I think research plays a critical role in helping us assure that we have quality care for our veterans.
Final question for me. Does the VA have every legal authority it needs to pay for a veteran whose care is delayed to receive care outside of the VA system?
To my knowledge, sir, yes.
So would it be correct to say that failure to deliver care in a timely fashion is simply a question of poor leadership at VA?
I think that would be a stretch, sir. I think that our system strives to treat patients within VHA because we think we do provide good care. We think we provide quality care. I hope that we can identify those circumstances where it may be necessary to send somebody into the private sector. I think we have to use all the resources that we have, sir.
Ms. Brownlee, any further questions?
I don't have any further questions, but I do have a comment that I would like to make, and to say that I too share the frustration of the committee that we're not able to get the answers that we want. And I think, we are looking for specifics, data, metrics, etc. And I always feel as though we never get them. We get answers like we have a system that provides eyes on the process, we have tools, but we're really looking for the specifics. Our staffs assure us that you know the questions that we're going to ask and what we're interested in knowing through these hearings. And it's just my feeling and my only conclusion that I can come to, if you're not willing to reveal the facts, that there is something that you don't want the public to hear. And I just want to make that statement. I don't know what else to conclude when we don't get the facts and information that we are specifically asking for.
Congresswoman, I would point out that, in fact, one of your staff members did meet with Dr. Mike Davies of our staff and did go over the consult tool that we are developing and was shown how it works.
Mr. O'Rourke or Ms. Titus, any further questions? Thank you very much for being here with us, and the second panel is dismissed. Members joining us on the third and final panel, and thank you very much for your indulgence in allowing VA to give their testimony before you, is Deborah Draper, Director of Health Care for the Government Accountability Office, and Dr. John Day, Assistant Inspector General for the Health Care Inspections for the VA Office of the Inspector General. The committee appreciates both of you for being here today, and thank you for your hard work and advocacy on behalf of America's veterans. Ms. Draper, we'll begin with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening testimony.
Chairman Miller and members of the committee, I am pleased to be here today to discuss access problems in VA that may delay needed medical care for veterans. GAO and others, including VA's Inspector General, have continued to report that VA medical centers do not always provide timely care, and in some cases, these delays have resulted in harm to veterans. My statement today covers two access to care concerns. First, I will highlight preliminary observations from our ongoing work related to VHA's management of outpatient specialty care consults. Second, I will discuss concerns regarding VHA's medical appointment wait times and scheduling, including progress VHA has reported making in implementing our December 2012 recommendations. VHA providers request and manage consults for specialty care using VHA's clinical consult process, which is supported by an electronic system. Clinical consults include both clinical consultations, such as an evaluation of a patient's clinical concern, as well as specialty procedures, such as a colonoscopy. The specialty care provider who receives the consult request is to review it within 7 days of it being sent to determine whether it is needed and appropriate. VHA's guideline is for the consult to be completed within 90 days. In 2012, VHA created a database to capture all consults system-wide. However, the data were deemed inadequate for monitoring purposes. One issue was the lack of standard processes and uses of the electronic consult system. For example, in addition to requesting consults for clinical concerns, the system was also being used to request a variety of administrative tasks, such as requesting veterans travel to appointments. Additionally, VHA could not accurately determine whether veterans actually received the care or received it in a timely manner. At the time the database was created, there were approximately 2 million consults open for more than 90 days. In May 2013, VHA initiated an initiative to standardize aspects of the consults process. The goal was of developing consistent and reliable system-wide consult information. Among other tasks, VA medical centers were to complete a clinical review as warranted and as appropriate close all consults open for more than 90 days. Through our ongoing work on outpatient specialty care consults, we found examples of delays in care at each of the VA medical centers included in our review. For example, for 3 of 10 gastroenterology consults reviewed in one facility, up to 210 days elapsed from the dates the consults were requested to when they were completed. In another facility, for 3 of 10 physical therapy consults requested, more than 100 days elapsed with no apparent actions taken to schedule an appointment. These consults were eventually sent back to the requesting provider without the veterans involved receiving the requested care. According to the patient's files, no non-service connected evaluations were being accepted due to the resource constraints in that area. We also found variation in how VHA's consult initiative is playing out at the local level. For example, VA medical centers have developed different strategies for clinical consults that are needed beyond the 90-day completion guideline. Some facilities are managing these future care consults outside of the electronic system, and consequently, these consults do not appear in VHA's system-wide data. VA medical centers are also not required to document how they address consults open for more than 90 days, and none of the facilities in our review were able to provide us specific documentation in this regard. VHA officials estimated that as of April 2014, of the 2 million open consults that existed when the system-wide database was created in 2012, 450,000 remained unresolved. Additionally, oversight of VHA's consult initiative has been limited and has not included independent verification of VHA medical centers' actions. Without this verification, VHA cannot be assured that the actions have been implemented correctly. Furthermore, VHA's consult data may not accurately reflect whether veterans received the care needed or if they received it in a timely manner. The second access to care concern that I wanted to highlight today relates to our December 2012 report and subsequent congressional testimony. We reported that VHA's outpatient medical appointment wait times were unreliable and that there were problems in the implementation of VHA's scheduling policy. We recommended VA take actions to improve the reliability of medical appointment wait time measures, ensure the consistent implementation of its scheduling policy, allocate scheduling resources based on needs, and improve telephone access for medical appointments. VA concurred with their recommendations and has reported continued actions to address them. For example, VHA officials told us they have implemented new wait time measures which they say are more reliable. We believe that work needs to continue to fully implement our recommendations. It is essential that VHA also assess the actions taken to ensure that they are achieving the intended results. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my opening remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Day, you're recognized. 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, members of the committee, it's an honor to be able to testify before you here today. I would like to recognize the courage of Mr. Coates for his testimony this morning. It was extremely important to hear, and I think very sad. My staff works tirelessly to try to ensure these events don't occur, and this is a failure for us to see a story like this. I believe the VA has lost its focus on the importance of providing quality medical care as its primary mission. In the day-to-day decisions that managers at all levels make, that they take for granted oftentimes and assume that quality medical care will be provided. When addressing the competing demands to provide medical education, research, support to our nation in time of natural disaster, comp and pen exams, the fight on the war on homelessness, managers have lost focus on the importance of making quality medical care delivery their #1 priority. In my written statement, I addressed 3 events that we've recently published that have occurred at more than 2 institutions. One is the colon cancer issue that we've discussed here previously. The second would be veterans at Miami and Atlanta who died while in VA hospitals from overdoses of street drugs. And in both cases, basic policies were not followed. In Buffalo and Salisbury, North Carolina, insulin pens designed to be used for one patient to take multiple doses were instead used on the ward for multiple patients, putting hundreds of veterans at risk for the risk of blood-borne viral infections. There is no good explanation for these events. They are not consistent with good medical practice, they're not consistent with common sense, and they're not consistent with VA policies that exist. The most important factor in preventing these events, in my view, is excellent leadership that instills a culture of safety and accountability. In addition, I believe that a review of VHA's organization and business rules is appropriate to determine if there are changes that would support the singular importance of quality of care and improve the ability of leadership to deliver that high-quality medical care across the system. For example, one might identify positions within the medical center that are deemed essential for the delivery of medical care. And should one of those positions become vacant, for instance, the nurse in the colonoscopy suite or the GI nurse, that job would automatically be refilled. Wouldn't have to compete for being refilled with an administrator for medical education or a technician who might want to be hired for research. So again, a way to try to focus the budget and resources on health care. In addition, VISN and hospital structures are not standardized. It's not possible to look at the position descriptions are not the same. The areas of responsibility are not the same. So if you ask the simple question, who owns the operating room, you're not really sure if it's the chief of surgery, is it the chief of anesthesia, is it the chief of the surgical care line, is it the head nurse? So I believe that these rules that currently exist, which, and I will be the first to admit that the VISN system and the mantra that all health care is local has served the VA very well. I believe that these systems ought to be looked at to see if it's time to change some of these rules. With that, I'll end this portion of my testimony and be pleased to take questions.
Thank you both. I was looking at the written statement for the GAO, and you talked about, and the IG just talked about it too, references that VA experienced difficulty in hiring and retaining specialists for gastroenterology and physical therapy. And the question is, did you find any reason for that?
Yes, you mean
either can answer. I think.
Yeah, I think what we hear in some locations that for some for some specialists, it's a national shortage of some of those specialists. So it is difficult to hire. I think generally we heard that there was an increased volume requests for services. That's complicating it. So if you have a shortage of providers, then you can't backfill and increase the capacity that you have within the specialty clinics. So we did hear some of that.
I would suspect that if you had a shortage of providers or you had vacancies that you couldn't fill, then the obvious thing would be to use fee-for-service if possible. And then the question begs to be answered, do you think VA makes adequate or even maximum use of fee-basis resources when those specialists are not available?
We've looked at this to some degree. I mean, it varies considerably from facility to facility. In one facility, for example, they fee-base 200 to 300 GI consults a month. In other facilities, they do very little. So it's it's hard to understand what the variation is, but it does vary considerably from one facility to another.
I would say, sir, that this is not a new problem. We published, a similar report in 2006 that outlined the difficulty VA had in following up on patients who were being screened for colonoscopy and needed tests to look for the presence of colon cancer on a regular basis. And so I think, A, you have to have a system in place, but B, you're just talking about a procedure. The procedure can be done by a variety of people trained to do that procedure. So if the question is, do you need a colonoscopy done? Well, maybe a PA could do that, or maybe a nurse could do that to have the training and assist the physicians and other staff to make sure that the simple procedure got done adequately. And then where a physician needed to impart additional insight into what one should do, you could schedule visits for that. So I think this is just not a new problem. The other point I would make is that many VAs, probably about 100 of them, are affiliated with medical schools. So you have right there a whole set of physicians that are in the community that are available, so that if you could work with that group of patients, a group of facilities, one could probably construct solutions that would be worthwhile. So I think fee basis consults, creative use and training of your resources and your people to plan for what you know are going to be ongoing problems, they're all parts of the solution here.
Mr. Draper, have you ever seen an instance or instances where a VISN director or a medical center director restricted the use of fee basis care funds or diverted those funds to be used in other programs?
I have not, but I've never really looked at that in any great detail. But I do want to say one thing about fee bases as well, is that these are not tracked the same way, so you don't know what the wait times are. So when you fee base something out, you lose that tracking ability to see. So you may not really be accomplishing something, you may not be getting the care in a timely way. It's just that VA doesn't know. They don't really track that. So
Well, and again, they should.
they should, and we pointed that out in our previous report.
And we found this issue in Atlanta in particular, where mental health care was an issue, where basically once VA fees something out, it appeared that they just dropped off the radar screen and they weren't watching or tracking. And again, just because they're not getting care in a VA facility doesn't mean that they're not VA's patient or America's patient, and VA had darn sure better.
Right, and
learn to
VA is
track 'em.
paying the bill. So, I mean, that was one of the issues we pointed out in our 2012 report, is that is not tracked.
Actually, a grateful American taxpayer is paying the bill, and I think VA forgets that sometimes. It is the taxpayers' funds, not theirs.
Right.
Ms. Bradley? Oh, Ms. Titus.
We've been here a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just keep hearing a theme over and over that these things seem to vary from facility to facility. Now, I understand perhaps the need for some flexibility because some hospitals may be associated with the medical school, different demographics, different geography, all of that. But it seems to me there's some need for some kind of standardized policy to some extent. I know at the Las Vegas hospital, they are flying in emergency room doctors from all over the country on contract for a few day schedules. That doesn't seem very practical to me. There must be in all over the Las Vegas Valley some emergency room doctors who could do that. Seems like you'd save money and get more of a buy-in from the medical community than these kind of flying in doctors. But I would like that addressed. But I'd also like to go back to the Sandy Neekum case. Dr. Lynch kind of got his memory back in the course of answering that question. But I'd like to ask y'all if you can give us some kind of progress report so we can find out if that is moving and when we're able to get some results.
Yes, the research on that has been done. The report's been written. It's in draft phase, and it will be out within a couple of 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll be ready. We will, in the normal process, I'd like to clarify a little bit what was said previous. We would write a report and lay out the facts as we see them. We would then send the report to VHA at multiple levels, including the hospital in Las Vegas, and ask them to read the report and verify they think the facts are correct. We would then make recommendations in the report and ask them to respond to the recommendations, and they would, in writing, respond to those recommendations. At that point, we would offer the committee and you a briefing on the findings, and we would publish the report to the web where it would be public. That would be our report plus their response. The response sometimes takes a while for VA to follow back up on, and so we then have a part of our office that does follow up. Usually it is that we ask for records to prove that X and Y were done, and if they provide records that X and Y were done, then we usually close it. Occasionally, we say, this is so important an issue that we'll personally go back and revisit the facility and try to do a follow-up. The follow-up documents, though, are basically not made public unless they're requested. So they're internal to us. I see them, you ask for them, you can get them. We do provide a list to Congress multiple times a year of those recommendations that have not been filled within a year. So where we've not been unable to close a recommendation on one of our reports within a year, we make that available to you as an item, and we're happy to talk about those.
Well, thank you. So when you say the report will be finished within 3 weeks or so, is that the stage of when you then send it to the hospital, or is
No,
it
no, I think
completely
it will,
finished?
I think we should get, this should be publishable within 3 weeks or so, 3, 4 weeks.
Well, I look forward to getting that. And it seems to me that sometimes these reports that focus on a specific problem in a specific hospital are used to address just that and not taken in the broader perspective, so that they can be used to solve problems at other facilities.
Well, I think in terms of just producing a report and making sure it's accurate, I have to narrow the scope oftentimes to what I can be accurate about. But if one looks at the reports that we've put out, or you ask us to talk about it, I'm familiar with the reports we've put out. We're happy to try to talk about patterns we see. Certainly, VHA gets the reports, and they can look for patterns, and we're aware of patterns. So I think you're right. There is a difficulty in that they don't all talk to the universe, but I can't do that and get it out timely.
I understand that. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Day, a couple things that you said really struck home in terms of trying to figure out what's going wrong and how we fix it. You said it was a question of leadership, and then you also said it's a question of having a culture that prioritizes safety and accountability. And those issues are so big, so tough to address in a 5-minute question and response. But I'll just tell you, I've had the chance to meet Secretary Shinseki. I've heard him testify here. I have no question whatsoever that he has the highest and deepest commitment to improving the service of the VA. And if he were here, I'm sure he would agree and share everyone's frustration and say that the results that we've described today are unacceptable. And I also have no doubt about Dr. Lynch and Dr. Clancy and their commitment. The people that I meet within the VA are good people who I think are trying, and yet the awful numbers that I gave for El Paso earlier are not new. In 2008, we had the worst access in the country to be able to get in to see a doctor, and it has improved only marginally since then. So despite good people doing good work and assuring us of their efforts, it is not getting better, certainly not quickly enough for the veterans who need to seek care. Let me ask you this, in assessing the job that I'm doing and the job that Congress and this committee is doing, the primary responsibility for these veterans is within the VA. The ultimate responsibility is within Congress. We have the power and responsibility of authorizing, appropriating, and oversight. And so I'll ask you the question that I asked Dr. Lynch. What could we be doing that we are not doing now to change the outcome and to get veterans the care that is being delayed and ultimately denied, as we heard with Mr. Coates and as I see every single day in El Paso?
I've watched the system for a while. I agree that the people that work in it are excellent. They're committed. Many are veterans, and they're of the highest quality when you sit and talk to them. That's why I expressed the frustration over the events I talked about when you say, well, what really happened? And often I think, so let me go to your point. I think that serious thought needs to go into the business model that VA uses now to deliver care. So if in the middle of Manhattan, and you have multiple medical schools and many hospitals, you have a different group of folks to deal with in terms of trying to resource and provide care. You would make different decisions about how you provided care. You may decide that cardiac surgery is so great at this hospital that why should I get into that business? Why wouldn't I use it all the time? And if you're in a different facility someplace, you have entirely different business needs. And I think that the VA structure has not morphed over the last number of years as I think it should. In the past, I think most veterans lived in the shadow of the hospital. They drove and could get there, and they were enrolled in that facility. If the goal is to deliver one standard of care to all veterans who are eligible for that particular piece of care, the ones that live on the other side of the mountain across the river, then I think you have to rethink a little bit how you're doing that. And so I would take a serious look at, given that information flow has changed, data requirements have changed, data is available, that the capabilities of computing are different, that I think it's time to take a look and fix what needs to be fixed bureaucratically to drive efficiency and drive standardization, but try very hard to preserve the mantra that all healthcare is local so that local folks can make important local decisions.
And I appreciate the fact that representatives from the VA are here listening to this, and I'm sure at headquarters they're listening as well. And to a certain degree, they can choose to adopt these recommendations administratively. But just to put a finer point on the question I'm asking, are you suggesting that, again, despite the best efforts within the VA and current leadership, we're not seeing the kind of change that we need, that the recommendation you're making needs to come in the form of a legislative proposal, a bill that would force the VA to change how it delivers care?
So how change occurs, I'm not quite the expert on, whether it needed to be law or discussion, but certainly if you were going to change vision structure, I'm assuming you probably need to change some law. But what I'm pointing to is, you know, in a GI clinic, where you're scheduling colonoscopies, and you have people that need colonoscopies, you know what the demand is. If you lose a critical player in that clinic, then you know you can't do the work that you did before. So the people in that clinic, the doctors, the nurses, everybody needs to have an easy conduit to drive change and make it happen. If the complaint is that at the local level within the hospital, they can't get the positions filled they need filled to ensure that what gets done, and those people who are not bureaucratically responsible for the delivery of care are somehow able to drive resources outside of the delivery of primary care, I think that needs to be fixed. So I think I think there ought to be a study. I think there ought to be a good look at how VA is currently set up and see if there are not better ways to manage this system in 2014 and forward.
Thank you. Dr. Day, Ms. Draper, thank you for your testimony and your answers. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Titus, you have a request?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'd like to submit Mr. Michaud's written statement for the record because he couldn't be here.
Without objection. Be no further questions from the committee. We will be submitting some questions for the record. We appreciate a timely response from all the witnesses today. I do ask unanimous consent that all members would have 5 legislative days with which to revise and extend or add extraneous material to their remarks. Without objection, so ordered. And once again, thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. This hearing is adjourned.